What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. Thank you for your patience. I have been a little bit less consistent with the podcast lately, and I am fully aware of that. I actually had to travel kind of impromptu trip to Maine last week. Unfortunately, my grandmother on my mom's side passed and did not get any recording in there. So it's been a little bit, but had a great trip. And although it was for an unfortunate reason, still got to see a bunch of people that I don't see very often, a bunch of family. And we were going to go up late August, early September, and we just kind of had to push it up a month. So anyway, back to the regularly scheduled grind. And if you're watching on video, you'll notice a little bit of a background change. My wife came in and went to town on improving the looks of my podcast recording area / my office. And I think it looks pretty cool. Very simple, not as much stuff as there used to be. And that's fine by me. And I'm excited to get a podcast recorded in for the first time. So today is going to be a Q&A episode from this week's Q&As from my Instagram. If you want your question answered, that is the best way to do it. Follow me on Instagram, Terminator_training, and look out for usually bi-weekly Instagram story Q&As where I go and put the question and answer up. You ask whatever question you have, and I try to get to some on Instagram, and trying to get to some more here on the show. So I'm going to go through, pick some of the better ones, or what I think are the better ones. I have really not looked at most of these yet, because I only answered a few questions. They were early on Instagram. So some of these are going to be the first time I see them. So that's, if I pick a question that, maybe you don't consider a good question, that's kind of why. But I usually go through and curate them and make sure we got the good ones. So with that out of the way, let's hop into question number 1. I am shipping to SWIC. SWIC is the Special Warfare Center in school. It's essentially where people go to the Q course, or there's a bunch of different post Green Beret time or post Q course stuff, like pretty much any course that you go to as an SF guy or prepping for SF is SWIC. So that's SWIC. I'm heading to SWIC. What should I mainly focus on for the next few months before SFAS? So I'm guessing this person's heading to SWIC for like pre-SFAS or SOPSI or something like that. Maybe. Something like that. Usually you don't go to SWIC before you go to SFAS unless you're an 18 X-ray. But either way, a few months before selection, that you should definitely focus on prepping for selection. That would be my best recommendation. I have talked about selection prep extensively throughout most of my episodes and on my Instagram. And, basically all my content is somewhat related, if not directly related to selection prep. So I would start by going through a bunch of my podcast episodes. I would go through a bunch of my posts on Instagram. And if you need a program, Ruck, Run, Lift, or SFAS Prep would both be highly appropriate programs. So you can hop on one of those and you would be more than prepared, assuming you have a decent, solid base. If you're starting from scratch and you have selection in a few months, that's a different story, but I highly doubt that you're just starting with nothing. So that would be my recommendation. And yeah, best of luck. SWIC's a good time, depending on what your definition of a good time is. But you're one step closer to hopefully accomplishing your goals and continuing to be at SWIC for the Q course and so on and so forth, and then going to group and crushing. So best of luck. Next question is not a question, but Maine is the greatest state in the union. I used to agree with that. I don't quite agree anymore, only because the months of November through March, April are just kind of depressing. But this time of year, Maine is amazing. Great place to go. If you're going to go to Maine, I know most people aren't going to go to Maine. Some people don't even remember that it exists. It's a state that exists. That's kind of a joke. But if you are going to go to Maine, I would recommend going anytime between early June and mid to late October. Obviously, the leaves start to change in October. I don't know exactly when. It's been a while since I've been there in the fall, but I would say like early October they start changing. And then throughout that month, you can see some awesome colors. Or if you're more interested in just like being outside and enjoying nice weather and going to the ocean and things like that, then August, July, June are all really good times to go. For example, I was there last week. What were the dates? Like the 7th through the 14th of August. And every day was like 76 to 80 and very low humidity. There were a couple days that were actually a little bit higher, up close to 90, but it just doesn't feel like it's that hot, especially coming from here in North Carolina where it could be 75 and you're still sweating your ass off just because of the humidity. So great time of year to go, and it's a solid state. I can't wholeheartedly agree with you, though, that it's the best state in the union. Next question. In your opinion, how important is it to have a good squat and deadlift to be good at rucking? So this isn't necessarily just my opinion, but it's also in my experience. It's also doing it myself, helping other clients do it, and just knowing generally about strength and conditioning. In this case, more so endurance, but also a little bit of strength, because you mentioned the squats and deadlifts. It is not completely irrelevant, but you don't have to be a strong squatter and deadlifter to smash rucks. And I know this because rucking was probably my strongest attribute when I went to selection, as well as throughout my career, just relatively speaking. And when I went to selection, my squat and deadlift were pretty much non-existent. I was not very strong at all. I was strong enough to still run well with a ruck on my back, but I might have had a 225 squat. I was 168 pounds for what it's worth at 6'1". Just for reference, today I'm like 197, 198, so 30 pounds lighter. About the same level of leanness, give or take 10% body fat. And yeah, my squat was probably 225. My deadlift might have been, on a really good day, maybe 315. But I just didn't really take those lifts very seriously at that time. And I did a lot of circuit training, a lot of calisthenics, of course, a lot of endurance, running, rucking, and just didn't really focus much on those lifts. And I still could ruck 8:30 miles, 8:45 miles for a 12 miler. So my PR 12 mile is an hour 36 and change. And when I got that was a little bit later on in the Q course. I probably weighed 174 pounds, maybe 175, and still wasn't all that much stronger than the numbers I said earlier. So additionally, you don't have to do those two lifts at all. I've talked about this tons and tons of times, but so long as you're doing a squat movement that works really well for you, that you feel good with, and that you can progressively overload, and that doesn't bang you up, whether that's a hack squat or a leg press or a belt squat or a barbell squat or a safety bar squat or a front squat. If you got those blocks checked, you're going to be fine, even if you don't do that lift. And same with deadlift. I would say the deadlift is even less appropriate for more people than the squat would be, as far as doing it long term, getting great results from it, feeling really good. An onlooker, someone from the outside looking in, comes up to you and watches you do a deadlift, and they're actually like somewhat impressed. Just for most people, I would say, like most people, not even exaggerating, that's just not the case. And they're usually better off doing a deadlift variation, an RDL, a single leg RDL, a stiff-legged deadlift, a 45-degree back raise, any number of different hinges that still work the same musculature, will still make you strong, will still make you jacked, but also just don't beat you up as much and have that lower risk profile than an actual deadlift off the floor. And you can still develop a great posterior chain, a very strong posterior chain, without doing deadlifts off the floor. That does not mean you should just stop deadlifting if you enjoy the deadlift and you feel good with it. But it is kind of permission for some people who know that the deadlift, or they hear the deadlift is a really, really good lift, and it's like one of the best bang for your buck exercises in existence. And I would say that's pretty much the case. Like, I don't disagree with that. But for some people, it's not a very good bang for your buck exercise. It's more of a bang yourself up exercise. So that's not super related to the question, but at the same time, it's also just a reminder that you don't necessarily have to do those exact lifts, whether you're looking to get good at rucking or not. If you want stronger legs and you want a stronger posterior chain, there's tons and tons of different options for the squat movement and the deadlift movement, and you can choose from that. any of those options. And as far as rucking, you do want to be stronger than like a high level runner would be that just runs and barely lifts. Otherwise, you're probably going to struggle when you get that 50, 60 pound ruck on your back and you try to move with it for a long period of time. But you also don't have to have outlandish squat and deadlift numbers to ruck like a savage. So that's my best advice in response to that one. All right, next question. Actually, next two questions, they're going to be quick program questions. Next one is best program for OSUT train up. If you want to bias running a little bit more, the 2 and 5 mile. If you want something more balanced, ruck, run, lift, Gazelle or Gazelle 2.0. If you want to hear more about Gazelle 2.0 and the 2 and 5 mile, go and check out my episode where I go over it. I think it's like 170, give or take. Just type in something like program review and it should bring you to that. I will do my best to link this in the description. I had not released Ruck, Run, Lift at that time, so that is not included. I will have an episode coming up that discusses Ruck, Run, Lift in detail, but any of those can work. The three besides 2 and 5 mile are more of a balance between running, rucking, lifting. Obviously, Ruck, Run, Lifts that. Probably a little excessive pre-OSUT, but Gazelle 2.0, 2 and 5 mile are all great options. And you can kind of choose based on kind of what sounds best to you or looks best to you, and you'll be more than prepared for OSUT. And the next programming question is, do you have a hybrid program with a powerlifting focus for the strength work? Yes, Gazelle, the original, is exactly that in a nutshell. So that's what I would check out. And by the way, everything right now is on sale in the soft bundle. The soft bundle includes Gazelle 2.0, Ruck, Run, Lift, the 2 and 5 mile, SFAS Prep, and the Soft Prep Recovery Guide. All those are 25% off. No code necessary. Sale is automatic. That is the soft bundle. You can pick and choose. You don't have to just get all of them, or you don't have to get a certain combo. You can literally just get one, or you can get two, whatever it is, and just they're on sale. They're going to be 25% off. So if you're hearing this the first couple days it comes out, that sale is active. Next question. I'm averaging 12 miles a week for base build, bumping up to 20 for 2 and 5 mile program. Is that acceptable? Yeah, it's definitely acceptable, but I would not just immediately go from 12 to 20 miles. That would be a significant, almost 100% volume increase. It's like an 80% volume increase. And that would be too much to do in like a week's time or at the drop of a dime. Instead, I would probably go up to like 14 miles next week, maybe 15 or 16 the following week, get a few weeks in a row. There's nothing wrong with running the same amount of miles in back-to-back weeks. That's totally fine too. So you can work your way up to 20, and I would say that's a pretty damn good idea. 12 miles a week is a little bit insufficient for a good solid base, but once you get up to 20, which might take you 4 or 5 weeks, then going into 2 and 5 mile would be a totally fine idea. Now, you might not wait that long because a lot of people won't. A lot of people just want to start running fast, which is not optimal. It's not the right decision, but it's just the decision that, based on my experience, a lot of people make. And that's not the end of the world, as long as you are listening to your body and not trying to add a bunch of extra stuff or move a bunch of stuff around. And, you take the program very seriously, but you also take how you're feeling and how you're recovering and how you're progressing very seriously and kind of adjust accordingly. If you start the program with lower miles, just expect to potentially be blade running a little bit more. It's not a crazy high volume program, but it does get intense, especially in the last phase. There's a lot of running fast. So just consider that, listen to your body, be smart about it, use some critical thinking, common sense, and you should be good to go. Next question. What was your 18 and 40 miler time in SMU selection? My 18 mile time was about 2:37 and change according to my Timex watch, which is pretty fast. You don't have to be that fast. I think that's like an 8:43 mile or 8:44 mile. I was one of 3 guys in my class to finish under 3 hours. So if you're in the 3 to 3.5 hour range, you're doing really, really well. And that's just it's literally just one little sliver of your potential. Like, you still have to go out and navigate for 3 weeks consecutively after that. So it does feel good to go and crush on day one, of course, but also just keep in mind that it's not everything. My 40 miler, I don't even know what my time was. I want to say it was like 11 or 12 hours. I wasn't really diligently tracking how long it took. That compared to the 18 miler, you're actually navigating. So it's totally different vibe. It's a totally different feel. So I think I was definitely under 12 hours, but I don't think it was by that much. But there were guys in the 16, 17, 18, 19 hour range. We're still fine. Because again, it's your cumulative performance. It doesn't really matter what you do on a single day, as long as you don't do anything crazy bad on a single day, then you're usually going to be fine. So just being consistent and doing your best is my best advice for that selection, as well as really any selection. Just do what they tell you to the best of your ability. Of course, show up prepared. That's going to allow your best to the best of your ability to be good enough to actually meet the standards. But beyond that, it's just taking it a day at a time and not trying to think and future cast and game plan everything. Just do what they tell you to do when they tell you to do it to the best of your ability. And if that happens to be sufficient for their standards, then you're going to succeed. Next question, tips for shoulder tightness after tempo runs and repeats. Interesting. So shoulder tightness after running, that could be any number of things. And I'm not going to try and be Mr. Doctor and diagnose you. But one thing that comes to mind pretty quick, and this would work for lots of different people, when they have tight shoulders or sore shoulders, whether it's from running, which is less common, or from lifting, or really whatever you're doing that kind of exacerbates your shoulder issues, hang from a pull-up bar more often. And when I say more often, I mean like every day. Hanging from a pull-up bar doesn't really take all that much effort. It doesn't take a lot of willpower. All you really need is something to hang from. It doesn't even have to be a pull-up bar. It could be a beam or really anything that you can hang off of. And what I usually recommend is doing it either pre and post workout, or if you have one at your house, do it in the morning, in the evening, or even the morning, midday, and evening. And there's no perfect protocol. I usually don't recommend just going to grip failure and hanging as long as you can. What I usually do, I go out a couple times a day to my garage and I have a pull-up bar out there. I'll do a 7 to 8 RPE hang with no straps. Just go until I'm like 7 or 8 out of 10 as far as how close to failure I am. So pretty challenging, but also not just go until I exhaust myself. And then I'll take a little break, put straps on. I use grips, Versa grips, and then I'll hang using the grips for a while. You can hang a lot longer, of course. And that just kind of like decompresses everything, decompresses your spine a little bit too. You just feel generally better afterwards. But frequent dead hangs, super easy, super lazy, but also very effective. And without knowing more about your shoulder history, your potential injury history, what else you're doing for training besides running, I'm guessing, strongly predicting that something else you're doing in training is causing the shoulder issue, and running just kind of exacerbates it or flares it up. Highly doubt the shoulder is hurting from running, but definitely take a look at your execution, your exercise selection, your overall training load, your volume, your recovery, and your overall mobility. And that could be a good little way to troubleshoot it and kind of stop experiencing this issue, or at least experience it a little bit less, because it should not necessarily be a thing. Next question, moving from sea level to Colorado Springs soon, acclimation advice, finishing Jack Gazelle 2 before. Yeah, I mean, there's no real strategy or like secret method that is going to make you acclimate more other than just consistently training and giving it some time. A lot of people think it's this like crazy night and day difference, and that you're just going to be terrible and you're going to lose so much time off all your runs and just be out of breath all the time. And that's not the case. Yes, Colorado Springs is pretty high. I would say on average, Colorado Springs is probably like 6,500 feet. So it's well over a mile above sea level. And you will feel it. You'll feel it lifting wise, or at least if you're like me, you'll feel it in the gym as well as with your conditioning. More so with conditioning, of course. But after, a week or two, you should feel totally fine. You're going to be a little slower just compared to your sea level numbers, but that's normal. Like, you should be slower. There's less oxygen to breathe. And so there's less oxygen to actually support whatever you're doing for training, but it's not by like that much. You're not going to go from running a 14-minute 2-mile at sea level to 16:30 2-mile at Colorado Springs. It may be, I want to say for every 1,000 feet, it's like a 1%. I'm not 100% sure on this, but for every 1,000 feet you go above sea level, I think it's like a 1% difference. So really not all that much. You're looking at here a 5%, even if it's 1 to 2%, you're looking at a 5 to 10% difference, which on shorter efforts, it's really not that much. So just go and train, be consistent, give it some time, and eventually your body will adapt. But also just note that you're not going to be quite as fast. All else equal, conditions in sea level, conditions at Colorado Springs, you're just not going to be as fast. But if you continue getting fitter and you continue training consistently, you're going to get faster anyway. So you really won't have like a control group to compare it to at sea level other than your former self. So that's my best advice. Enjoy Carson. Carson's a great place to train. And I don't love Colorado Springs all that much, just in general, nor does my wife. But that area is just really nice. And like Denver is about an hour north. Boulder, lots of different places, ski resorts if you're into winter stuff, and it's a good time. Next question, why front or SSB, safety squat bar, squats and not back squats in ruck, run, lift? All right, so if you go to phase 2, I believe it's phase 2. Phase 2 has back squats, but in phase 1, why front or SSB? Because they're both great squat movements, and honestly, a front squat or a safety bar squat would be a better squat movement for more people based on my experience coaching lots of different people than a back squat. The safety bar squat does not require any upper body mobility, whereas the barbell squat, the barbell back squat does. Now the front squat definitely, especially if you hold it in the clean position, the clean catch position, it definitely requires some mobility, and a lot of people can't hold in that position, which is fine. You can just do the classic bro across the shoulders with the crossed arms position if you like. But they're both very effective movements, and when I'm choosing a main squat for a phase or a block of my training, like there's lots of different things to choose from, and I can't choose every single squat. So in the first phase, those are the squats I chose for free weight squats. And then later that week, there's a machine squat or something like that. I am not looking at the program, so that may not be the case. But in a lot of them, in a lot of my clients' programs, we'll squat a couple times a week. But the main squat on one day is more of a free weight squat, whether it's front squat, back squat, low bar, high bar, safety bar, leg press. And then the second squat movement day will sometimes be, if we did a back squat on the first one, we might do a front squat, or we might do a safety bar squat, or we might do a hack squat or leg press or a belt squat, whatever it is. And it's effective. So the main reason there's no back squats in the first phase of ruck, run, lift is because A, it's not a powerlifting program. If you go back to an earlier question, I kind of explained why not everyone needs to, nor should do back squats. But B, it's because there are lots of other great squat movements, and the front squat and safety bar squat are 2 examples. And C, there's back squats later on in the program. So that is the reasoning behind that. Next question, tips on cutting weight. I'm eating in a deficit, but don't seem to be losing weight. All right. So unless you are the very first person in the history of the world to defy a law, a scientific law of physics called the law of thermodynamics, which essentially, I'm not saying the exact definition, but in this case means if you eat in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. If you eat at maintenance, you're going to gain weight. Maintain your weight. If you eat in a surplus, you're going to gain weight. Unless you are defying that law and eating in a deficit but still not losing weight, then you're probably not eating in a deficit. And that's very, very common. A lot of people think they're in a deficit, but for a various multitude of different reasons, they're not actually in a deficit. And so they stay the same. That's really the only possibility of what's going on right now. So you're not in a deficit, but you also asked tips for cutting weight. Lots and lots of different ways to approach this. One, for you, I would highly suggest eating normally, eating the same way you are right now, but being very, very meticulous with tracking. What you may be doing, and which is really common, is you put some dressing on something or some oil. You cook with some oil, or you think something is a tablespoon, but it's actually 2 or 3 tablespoons. Examples like that where, maybe you are tracking, or maybe you are pretty aware, or maybe you're close, but, you put 3 tablespoons of olive oil in a pan to cook versus 1. That's several hundred calories difference. And that's super common for people to do that all the time. And things like peanut butter. A 2 tablespoon scoop of peanut butter, which is 1 serving, is pretty damn small. It's kind of depressingly small, especially if you're cutting. Peanut butter is not the best cutting food. It's not a bad food, and it's not like gonna kill you, and it can be eaten on a cut, but it's like not ideal because it's super high calorie dense, and it's delicious, of course, too. So it's hard to eat the serving you want to eat without eating any extra. And also, you got to make sure that you're measuring it properly. So be very, very, very diligent with your tracking. I would do that for at least a week, ideally like 10 days. Also track your weight. And if you're staying the same weight after that 10 days, then you know that calorie intake is about your maintenance. Because when you eat maintenance calories, you stay the same, give or take. Of course, you're going to fluctuate. Weight loss and weight gain is not all calories. Like, I could drink this entire thing of water and I'd probably gain half a pound, like immediately. Not because I ate a bunch of calories and got fat, but because water has weight. So remember that too. Your weight's going to fluctuate a little. That's why I like to do it for like 7 to 10 days. So you can kind of take the average body weight as well as calorie intake. From there, you want to create a deficit, most likely, unless you have been, in a deficit forever and you're eating like 1,500 calories or something like that, and you're not losing weight, then in that case, you probably should consider something like reverse dieting, which I won't really get into here, but cutting tips from here is kind of what we're getting into. So once you find your maintenance, create a deficit, probably 300 at the most 500 calories per day on average. Make sure your protein's high enough. If you're struggling with hunger, you can crank the protein up a little bit higher. Minimum in a cut, I usually recommend 1 gram per pound of body weight. You definitely can go to like 1.25, even 1.5, just depending on the calories you're consuming, as well as like the micronutrients you're getting. You don't want to just eat protein and just forget about everything else. You're not going to feel good. But upping that protein a little can help with satiety and also muscle preservation. Make sure you're lifting weights, send your body a signal to build muscle. Although you may not build much muscle, if any, depending on your training experience, that's your best bet at maintaining as much muscle as possible and losing mostly fat rather than just losing weight, which could be muscle, could be fat if you're not lifting weights. One of the things that people go really astray with is doing tons and tons of cardio when they're in a cut. And although it sounds counterintuitive to keep cardio a little bit to a minimum or do less cardio than you otherwise would if you're at maintenance or in a surplus, it's usually the best idea. Manual calorie burn by doing cardio is just not a great long-term sustainable way to lose weight, especially if you want to lose fat and maintain your muscle. Doing some cardio, absolutely, but don't try and go and burn thousands of calories every day through cardio because your body's just going to adapt to it over time. It's going to be a big stressor on your body, and you're already stressed because when you're in a deficit, that's a stressor too. You add a bunch of cardio, excessive cardio to that, and it's just going to exacerbate all that. And your body's going to try and hang on to everything, and it's going to pare muscle down, especially if you're not lifting. But even if you are lifting and just doing excessive cardio in a calorie deficit, it's still not the best way to approach it. You can definitely use cardio as like an ace up your sleeve as you get towards the end of your cut and you don't want to cut any more calories, because when you are cutting over time, as you get smaller, and your metabolism kind of adjusts and slows down a little bit, your metabolic rate, you may have to cut further. So say you're eating 3,200 calories, that's your maintenance. You start your cut at say 2,800 calories. For a while, that's going to work great, but eventually it is probably going to stall out. And from there, you're going to have to cut a little bit more, which is one reason I don't recommend cutting a massive amount of calories at the very beginning. There are multiple other reasons for that too. But if you say cut 1,000 calories at the beginning, although you'd be all right, where do you go from there once you get down to 2,200 calories and that kind of slows down and stalls out? Yes, you could definitely decrease calories further, but may as well start in small increments, see how that goes for a while, and then continue to iterate after that. Definitely eat foods that are, especially if you're struggling with hunger and satiety, definitely eat foods that are more higher volume. So things like greens, of course, if you can digest this food well, greens, fruit, things that are higher in fiber to an extent are great options just because even though they're lower calories, they'll kind of keep you full. Make sure you're eating foods that digest well. Not every healthy food is healthy for everyone because some people don't digest even healthy foods really, really well. For example, like raw vegetables. Raw vegetables, not unhealthy at all, but if I eat too many of them, I feel terrible. They mess up my gut really, really bad. And so I don't eat a lot of raw vegetables, even though they're healthy foods. That's just one example in a single case study from me. But there are lots of people out there that continue to eat these really healthy foods that they either have sensitivities to or they just don't digest well and they feel like crap after eating and they keep eating them because they think they're healthy. Don't do that. Listen to your body, actually be kind of in tune with how certain foods make you feel and kind of go from there. But that's a good little few things to kind of start thinking about as you go about your cut. But the fact that you're not losing weight despite being in a calorie deficit, that just doesn't quite add up. You're likely thinking you're in a deficit, but you're not actually in a deficit, which again is really common, but just getting a little bit more meticulous is a good start. Next question, how common is insomnia before and during selection? Is it a problem or normal? It is probably pretty damn common just because selection prep is stressful on the body as well as the mind, like the actual training you're doing. And when you're higher stress than usual, especially if there's physical stress there from lots and lots of training, kind of like teetering that line between overdoing it versus doing enough, which is the essence of selection prep, which is why I don't recommend doing it perpetually. I've talked about that tons of times in the past. But also you're going to be mentally stressed because guess what? You're prepping for something really important that you really care about. And if you're not stressed about it and you don't have worries and doubts and uncertainties going into selection, then either you're a narcissist or you just don't care enough. So the fact that you care so much about it, that it's making it so that you struggle to sleep is kind of a good sign. Although physiologically, of course, not sleeping well, having insomnia is not great for your health or performance or recovery. So trying to kind of find some ways, I'll go over some ways to kind of combat this here in a second, but that's not ideal. But it is, I would say, very normal. It's very normal for people to worry and have doubts. I don't know how normal insomnia is necessarily, like specifically, but if you're struggling to sleep, some things to do. I've talked about this a lot in the past, but I'm still going to go over it because people still struggle with sleep and probably will forever. So I don't think I'm ever going to stop talking about it. But one, consistent sleep and wake times. That's by far number one. If you go to bed and wake up within the same 30 minutes, give or take, every day, including weekends. Yes, including weekends. I know it's hard, but usually the hardest things are also the more effective things. That's by far going to make the biggest difference. Getting outside in the morning, exposing your eyes, exposing your skin to the sun sometime after sunrise. And if you want to add a little bit more to that, a little more optimality, if you will, toward that, then you can consider going outside around sunset. That kind of shows your body that it's daytime and later on it's going to be nighttime by going outside in the morning. And then when you watch the sunset or you're outside for sunset, it kind of tells your body that bedtime is approaching. So that's a huge one. Limiting afternoon caffeine use or stimulant use. Honestly, for some people, just limiting stimulant use in general. Some people have more sensitivity towards stimulants than others, and it's in their system for a much longer time. So a lot of people are drinking coffee in the morning and they have no idea, but it's affecting their sleep that night. And during this time, especially when you're already struggling with sleep, maybe a good idea to either really cut back on it or even cut it out. I would recommend cutting it out before you go to selection so you're not withdrawing during the first week, but you could start doing that early and it might be a good idea for you. Booze, Of course, if you're prepping for selection, you're probably not drinking a ton of booze, but even if you have a little bit in the evening around dinner time, it's still going to affect your sleep negatively. And if you have a lot, it's going to affect your sleep that night and probably subsequent nights. And also, everyone knows by now, it's just not very performance friendly or recovery friendly to drink alcohol. Another thing you can consider is the timing of your dinner. If you're eating dinner really close to bedtime and it's a bigger dinner and it's still kind of digesting, or it's like just starting digesting when you go to bed, that can definitely mess your sleep up. And I would say the last hour of your day, mastering that last hour of your day, not watching YouTube, not watching Netflix, not scrolling on Instagram, doing something that does not involve blue light or a screen or tons and tons of dopamine hits, like reading, petting your dogs, chatting with your spouse, getting prepared for the next day, really anything other than just looking at screens or doing these short attention span things like Instagram and things like that would be a great way to spend the last hour of your day. So those things right there are going to make most of the difference, honestly, like the vast majority. Notice I did not talk about supplements. I didn't talk about any crazy hacks, just simple things like that. There is a rule called the 10-3-2-1-0 rule that I really like. 10 means last caffeine, so no caffeine within 10 hours of bedtime. 3 is no food within 3 hours of bedtime. You can kind of be a little bit more liberal with that. Like, it's no big deal if you have food 2.5 hours, 2 hours before bed. But if you are struggling, it could be a consideration. Have dinner earlier. 2 is no more liquids. Another thing people do that kind of bewilders me is they don't sleep well. They're always getting up to pee at night and they go to bed super duper hydrated. You don't have to be hydrated 24/7, like really well hydrated, like your urine looks like the water you're drinking. In fact, if the urine looks like the water you're drinking, you're overhydrated. But some people will go to bed like that and they'll wonder why they wake up 3 times throughout the night to go pee and struggle to get back to sleep. It's because you just drank a ton of water before bed. That's the main reason. That's the only reason. So 2 hours, no more liquids. 1 is what I just talked about. No screens, no Instagram, no Netflix. And then 0 is the number of times you'll press snooze. Pressing snooze is not necessarily a sleep killer, but it's just like a day and vibe and confidence and self-esteem killer, because literally you start your day with a lie. You said you're going to wake up at a certain time and you didn't. So starting your day with a lie, not a great thing in general. But aside from that, like, those things should work really, really well, but also don't stress it too much. Some people have insomnia and they're so stressed about the fact that they have insomnia that it gives them worse insomnia. So do your best not to stress about it. It is relatively normal to have doubts and uncertainties and worries before select anxiety, and that can affect your sleep. So just be consistent, do your best, and best of luck at selection. And that's going to be it for today, guys. I've got a call in 3 minutes that I got to prepare for. Thank you very much for tuning in. Reminder, those programs are all on sale. The soft bundle's all on sale. If you want to check those out, 25% off, automatic discount, Ruck, Run, Lift, Jack Gazelle 1 and 2, 2 and 5 mile, SFAS, as well as Soft Prep Recovery Guide. Those are all linked in the description. You can check those out and get those while they're marked down. Again, thanks for tuning in. I will be back soon with another episode. Till then, Terminator out.